Step into the shadows where whispered tales linger. In this playlist, we uncover urban legends, stories born in back alleys, abandoned roads, and the corners of your mind. Some say they're just myths, others aren't so sure. Listen if you dare.
I should never have gone into that museum. I knew the stories long before I ever set foot in that town. The cursed chair, they called it. The death chair. A piece of furniture so soaked in malice and misery that the very act of lowering yourself into it was an invitation for death to lean over your shoulder and whisper in your ear. I knew it all, had read the stories, heard the warnings, and yet something in me, curiosity, pride, stupidity, pulled me through those old wooden doors as if I had already given myself to whatever lived in that chair. The museum was nearly empty when I arrived. A gray drizzle outside had left the windows streaked, and the light that managed to slip through was watery and weak. The air smelled of damp stone and something else underneath, like old wood, burned once and left smoldering. The floorboards creaked in a way that made it feel as if someone was following behind me. But every time I turned, the long hallways were empty. The exhibits I passed were all ordinary at first. Rusted tools, fragments of pottery, cracked portraits of faces no one remembered. But I barely looked at them. I was searching for one thing only. I found it in a narrow room at the back, lit by a single hanging bulb that flickered with a sickly pulse. And there it was, mounted halfway up the wall as though it were some grotesque trophy. A chair, dark and warped with age, its wood eaten away in jagged bites of rot, the seat sagging slightly as though countless bodies had pressed into it, leaving the shape of themselves behind. Iron brackets held it against the wall, the legs dangling uselessly, frozen in the air. But even from across the room, I felt as though it wasn't truly restrained, as though it could pull itself free the instant it wanted to. I don't know how long I stood there staring at it. Minutes, maybe longer. My skin prickled with goose flesh and the hair on the back of my neck lifted. The air around that chair felt thicker, denser. Every breath dragged like smoke into my lungs. There was a plaque nailed crookedly beside it, and though I already knew what it would say, I stepped closer and read. The words told of its owner, a man who had killed, who had cursed the chair with his last bitter breath before being hanged. It spoke of soldiers, workers, wanderers, men who had rested in it, only to fall soon after into accidents so grotesque they read like stories meant to frighten children. Collapsed skulls, crushed spines, a man strangled by his own horse's reins, another found at the bottom of a quarry with every bone snapped clean. The stories piled one atop the other, each more gruesome than the last, until it was impossible not to believe there was some pattern, some invisible thread tying them all to the same place. The chair. I should have turned away. I should have laughed, walked back into the weak daylight and left the chair hanging in its prison. But as I stared, I felt something seep into me, something that hooked itself deep under my ribs. It wasn't a voice, not exactly, but it was a command all the same. Sit, as if the chair wanted to prove itself through me, through my body, as if it wanted to feed again. There was no one else in the room. No guards, no staff, no curious onlookers. Only me and the chair. My hand shook as I reached up, fingers grazing the underside of the seat, and it was warm. Not the faint warmth of wood left in the sun, but the damp, living heat of flesh. I jerked my hand back, but the feeling clung to me, crawling across my skin. I pressed my palm to my shirt, desperate to wipe it away, but it was as if my nerves themselves remembered. The brackets looked flimsy, old iron eaten with rust. I tested one and it groaned faintly under my touch, a sound like breath leaking through cracked teeth. The command grew louder. Sit, sit and belong to me. I knew I shouldn't. I knew what would happen. But the longer I stood there, the more my thoughts twisted until a new idea slithered into me. What if the curse was only a story? What if it was nothing but rotten wood and superstition? What if I sat and I survived? Wouldn't that mean the chair had nothing, was nothing? Wouldn't that mean I had beaten it? My heart hammered as I slipped the first bracket loose. The sound echoed too loudly in that small room, and I froze, listening. Nothing. The second came free with a shriek that made my teeth ache. For a moment the chair sagged forward, heavy and awkward, as though reluctant to leave the wall. And then I dragged it down, the legs scraping against stone, leaving faint gouges like claw marks. When it finally touched the ground, a vibration traveled up through the soles of my shoes, a low hum that went straight into my bones. I lowered myself into it before I could think better of it, the seat groaning beneath me like a living thing exhaling. The wood was slick, as though soaked in sweat. Cold sweat. My stomach churned. The second my weight settled, the light overhead flickered and nearly went out. The room darkened and the air grew thick, suffocating. A taste flooded my mouth. Copper, bitter, unmistakably blood. My tongue pressed against the back of my teeth and felt grit, as though something rotten had crumbled across it. I tried to stand, but my legs wouldn't move. It wasn't paralysis, not exactly. More like the chair itself was holding me, pinning me with invisible hands. Then came the sound. At first it was a faint whisper, like someone breathing right against my ear. But it multiplied quickly, voices piling on top of each other, murmurs rising to screams, 1,000 broken throats howling with rage and pain. I clutched the arms of the chair, but they felt soft, like skin stretched too thin over bone. My fingernails dug in and I swear the chair bled. Dark, thick droplets welled up beneath my nails, slicking my hands, and the smell of iron filled the room. Something touched the back of my neck. Fingers, ice cold, dragging slowly up into my hair. I whipped my head around, but there was nothing there. The shadows in the corners stretched, writhing, as though figures moved just beyond sight. Their shapes bent unnaturally, limbs too long, heads lolling as though broken. They crept closer with each flicker of the light. I couldn't breathe. My chest heaved, but the air refused to come. A weight pressed down on me, crushing, suffocating. I thought of every story I had read, every man who had sat before me, and I knew in that instant that they had felt this too. That final moment where the chair closed its grip around their soul. I thought I heard bones snapping, but I couldn't tell if it was memory, imagination, or the sound of my own ribs giving way. I forced myself to rise. It felt like lifting a corpse, heavy and unwilling, but I managed to stagger to my feet. The chair groaned in protest, the wood splitting faintly as though angry to be denied. I stumbled backward, colliding with the opposite wall, gasping for air that tasted of mold and decay. My vision blurred, but through it, I saw the chair sitting there, calm, innocent, as though it had never moved at all. But I knew it was alive. And worse, I knew it wasn't finished with me. Even as I backed out of the room, never taking my eyes off it, I felt the faintest shift deep in my chest, like something had settled inside me. Something foreign, something that did not belong. The whispers hadn't stopped. They had only grown quieter, curling into the dark corners of my mind, waiting. When I stepped back into the hallway, the museum seemed darker, emptier. The air was colder, and every shadow felt like it leaned toward me, listening. I wanted to run, to flee the building and never look back. But my legs dragged as though I were carrying more weight than my own body. By the time I reached the exit, the drizzle outside had become a downpour. I stumbled into it, welcoming the cold rain on my skin, hoping it would wash the chair's touch from me. But the warmth lingered. No matter how much I scrubbed at my hands, I could still feel the slickness of blood under my nails. I told myself I would be fine, that it was just an old piece of wood, a trick of nerves and imagination. But that night, as I lay in bed, I heard the sound again, the groan of wood under shifting weight. A chair, settling itself in the corner of my room where no chair should be. And then in the dark, a whisper so close it stirred the hair against my ear. "Sit!" I didn't sleep that night. I lay there rigid under the blankets, my eyes pinned to the corner of the room where the whisper had come from. At first it was empty, just shadows piling up where the walls met. But the longer I stared, the more the dark seemed to fold in on itself, forming the vague outline of a chair. My chair. Its warped back and slumped seat seemed carved into the blackness, and even though I knew it wasn't really there, I couldn't look away. Every time I blinked, I swore it shifted closer, dragging itself toward me in tiny jerks, like a broken marionette crawling across the floor. I turned on the lamp and the corner was empty again. But the relief lasted only seconds because when the light came, I saw what was wrong with my hands. My fingernails, the ones I had dug into the arms of the chair, were blackened at the base, bruised looking. The skin around them was red, cracked, and wet. When I pressed at one, a line of thick, dark fluid welled out. Not blood, not exactly. Something thicker like tar. I gagged, rushing to the bathroom, trying to scrub my hands raw under the tap, but the water only smeared the blackness wider, as though it were soaking into me instead of leaving. I wrapped my hands in towels and sat on the edge of the tub, shivering. My reflection in the mirror above the sink swam, distorted by condensation, but even through the mist I could tell something was wrong. My face was too pale, almost gray, veins crawling visibly just under the surface like dark threads. My eyes looked hollow, sunken, the whites faintly tinged yellow like old paper. And worst of all, behind me, where there should have been only steam and shadow, I saw the shape of someone standing. Not someone, something. Its head tilted at an unnatural angle, jaw slack, as if the bones had been snapped but it hadn't noticed. It had no features, just a dark hollow where a face should have been. And yet I knew it was staring straight at me. I spun around, but the bathroom was empty. The mirror, though, when I looked back, the figure was still there, closer now. One of its arms was reaching toward my shoulder, the fingers impossibly long, sharp at the tips. I smashed the mirror with my elbow. The sound shattered the silence, glass raining down into the sink. When I looked again, there was only my ruined reflection staring back at me, fractured into 100 pale, broken pieces. I didn't go back to bed. I couldn't. I sat in the kitchen with every light in the house blazing, watching the shadows crawl against the walls, waiting for dawn. By the time the sun rose, pale and weak behind the clouds, I thought maybe I'd imagined it all. Maybe it was shock, my mind trying to trick me after what I'd done in that museum. But then I saw the marks on the floor, scratches, long parallel grooves leading from the front door into the living room. I crouched down, running my finger along them, and they were deep, too deep for anything ordinary. The wood was split open, the edges raw. The marks led all the way into the room and then stopped right in front of my armchair, as if something had dragged itself inside, then sat waiting in the shadows while I tried to convince myself I was safe. I couldn't stay in the house. Every nerve screamed at me to get out, so I did. I dressed quickly, hands shaking, and left without breakfast, without a plan, without anything except the desperate need to move. The outside world should have been better, safer, but the curse followed. It started with small things. A man crossing the street in front of me slipped hard, his head striking the curb with a crack that turned my stomach. A bicyclist veered too close and collided with a lamppost, his ribs bending wrong as he crumpled against it. Tried to help, but every time I got near, their eyes rolled toward me, wide and terrified, as if they knew something had brought this on them, as if they could feel the chair pulsing inside me, spreading its rot outward. By the time I reached the cafe down the street, I was shaking so badly I could barely hold a cup of coffee. I sat by the window staring out, trying to steady my breathing, and then I saw it. Across the street, in the reflection of the glass, was the chair. Not inside the cafe, not outside on the road, but in the window's surface itself, as though the glass had become a doorway. I watched its legs twitch, lifting slightly off the ground, and then slam back down again in impatience. My coffee sloshed, spilling across the table, but I couldn't move. I couldn't even look away. And then the reflection shifted. The chair wasn't empty anymore. There was someone sitting in it. At first I thought it was me. I recognized the shape of my shoulders, the tilt of my head. But then it turned and I saw the face. My face, yes, but wrong. The skin was stretched too tight across the bone, eyes bulging from their sockets, lips drawn back to expose a blackened grin. My double stared through the glass, and its mouth moved. I didn't hear a voice, but I knew what it said. "You belong to me now." I ran. Left the coffee, left the chair in the window, left everything behind. I didn't care where I went, only that I kept moving. I ran until my lungs burned, until my legs shook, until the streets blurred together. I ducked into alleys, cut across parking lots, But no matter where I went, accidents bloomed in my wake. A car that had been parked suddenly rolled into traffic. A man carrying groceries slipped on nothing and broke his arm on the pavement. A woman screamed when her dog darted into the road and didn't come back out. And all of them looked at me, just for a moment, before the pain swallowed them. Their eyes accusing, horrified, as though I had dragged something out of the museum with me and forced it into the world. By the time I stumbled back home, I could barely stand. My skin burned, clammy with sweat, and when I finally pulled off my shirt, I saw why. My chest was covered in bruises, dark purple blossoms spreading across my ribs, my shoulders, down my arms. But when I touched them, they weren't just bruises. They pulsed faintly like heartbeats, like something alive was growing beneath the skin, pressing against it, waiting to break free. I collapsed on the floor, curling against the pain, and as the room dimmed around me, I saw them again, shadows gathering in the corners, their long limbs stretching toward me. Their broken bodies jerked closer, their jaws opening wide as though to swallow me whole, and behind them, towering over them, I saw the chair. Not wooden now, not furniture, a living thing, its legs bending, its arms splitting open to reveal muscle and sinew beneath the grain. It leaned toward me, its seat slick and wet, whispering in a voice made of every scream I'd ever heard that day. Sit. And even as I fought to stay awake, even as blood filled my mouth and pain lanced through my chest, a part of me wanted to obey. A part of me wanted to sink back into that waiting seat, let the wood swallow me, let the whispers stop. But I knew if I did, I wouldn't come back. Not as myself, not as anything human. I passed out there on the floor, and when I woke hours later, the bruises had spread. My skin no longer looked like skin at all, but like bark, dark, cracked, splintering. My fingernails had split down the middle, curling up into jagged edges, and when I coughed, something black splattered onto the floorboards. The chair wasn't in the room anymore, but I could feel it, inside me, and it was hungry. When I opened my eyes the next morning, the world felt tilted, wrong, as though gravity itself had shifted sideways. My limbs were heavy, stiff, but they no longer felt like mine. They bent too easily, joints cracking like old wood, and when I pushed myself off the floor, something deep inside my spine popped, sharp and wet, sending a shiver crawling through my body. The bruises that had blossomed across my chest weren't bruises anymore. The skin there had hardened, darkened, cracking in long, splinter-like lines. I ran a hand across it and it felt rough, like bark or dead wood. When I pressed harder, the skin split, and thick black fluid seeped out in sluggish rivulets. It dripped down my torso, warm and oily, and the smell made my stomach heave. But the worst part wasn't the changes. It was the voice. It wasn't whispering anymore. It was inside me, booming, commanding. Not words exactly, but urges. Hunger, rage, thirst for suffering. It clawed at my thoughts, drowning out my own voice, until I couldn't tell if the things I wanted were mine or the chair's. I staggered into the kitchen, searching for water, for food, for anything that might dull the hunger gnawing at me. I found bread, tore into it with shaking hands, but it tasted like ash, crumbling into dust on my tongue. I spat it out, gagging, but the hunger only grew. It wasn't for food. It was for something else, something alive. The chair wanted me to feed. At first, I fought it. I locked myself in the house, pacing the rooms, muttering to myself like a lunatic, trying to drown out the voice. But it filled every corner of my skull, pressing outward until it felt like my head would split. And when the hunger peaked, sharp and unbearable, I lost control. My body moved on its own. I found myself outside, staggering into the street, my vision tunneling. A man was walking his dog, humming under his breath, his face peaceful in the gray morning light. My stomach twisted, my throat tightening, and before I realized what I was doing, I lunged at him. He turned, startled, and tried to step back, but my hands were already on him. My fingers dug into his arms, and I felt something give beneath the skin, bones snapping like twigs. His scream split the air, high and raw, but it only fueled the fire inside me. I slammed him against the ground again and again, until the pavement was slick with blood and fragments of teeth glittered like white gravel. The dog barked wildly, lunging at my legs, but when I looked down at it, My vision blurred red. The next moment, the barking stopped. Silence. My hands were dripping. My stomach no longer hurt. I stumbled back, horrified at what I'd done. The man's body was twisted, broken in ways no living thing should ever be, and the dog was little more than a smear of fur and bone. I wanted to scream, to claw at my face, to rip the hunger out of me. But then the voice purred, satisfied, and a sick wave of pleasure rolled through me. I was feeding it, and it wanted more. That day blurred into a nightmare of violence. Everywhere I went, accidents followed. But they weren't accidents anymore. They were my hands, my strength. I tore into strangers, the voice guiding me, pushing me. My body moving with strength I shouldn't have had. A cyclist who tried to swerve around me ended up crushed against a wall. His head caved in under my fists. A shopkeeper who screamed when I staggered into her store had her throat opened before I even realized I was holding glass. Every time I killed, the blackness in my chest pulsed, spreading further, veins of rot crawling under my skin. My reflection in shop windows showed me splitting apart, my face peeling like old paint, my eyes sunk deep in shadow. And always, always behind me in the glass I saw it, the chair, watching, waiting. By nightfall, the police were everywhere. Sirens echoed through the streets, people shouted, lights flashed. I tried to run, but my legs dragged as though they were rooted into the earth. My chest throbbed in time with the chair's heartbeat, each pulse louder than the last, until it drowned out the world. I collapsed in an alley, my breath ragged, my hands trembling. I thought maybe it was over, maybe I would finally die, but the shadows thickened around me, and the chair rose up from them like a monument of rot. It loomed tall, its wooden frame twisted, its seat slick and pulsing like an organ. It. I shook my head, sobbing, but my body obeyed. My knees buckled, my spine bent, and I lowered myself into the phantom seat that wasn't really there but felt more solid than the ground beneath me. The moment I sat, agony ripped through me. My bones cracked, my skin split open, my blood boiled in my veins. I screamed, clawing at the air, but the chair held me down. I could feel it fusing with me. My spine digging into the backrest, my legs stiffening like the chair's warped legs, my arms fusing to the rests. Every breath I took was shared with it, every beat of my heart syncing with the wood's pulse. And the hunger, it exploded, filling me with fire, screaming for more, more, more. Voices surrounded me, the dead ones, the others who had sat before. Their screams were endless, echoing in my skull, begging for release, but their pleas twisted into laughter, because they knew what I was becoming. They had become it too. When I opened my eyes again, I was no longer in the alley. I was sitting in my living room in the chair. Not the real one, not the museum's relic, but one grown out of me, from me. My skin had hardened into its frame, my ribs had split and warped into its arms. I tried to stand, but I couldn't. I was the chair. And yet, when I looked around the room, I wasn't alone. The shadows had bodies now. Broken, crawling figures with limbs bending in directions they shouldn't. Their jaws hung loose, their necks bent, their eyes sunk in holes. They dragged themselves toward me, whispering and moaning. And when they reached me, they knelt at my legs as though I were some kind of throne. The hunger surged. And as they bent their necks toward me, offering themselves, I fed. I don't remember tearing into them. I don't remember the blood spraying, the bones crunching. I only remember the satisfaction, the chair inside me humming with joy, the whispers rising into a chorus of shrieks and laughter. When it was over, the room was empty. My hands were drenched, my mouth slick with blackness. The hunger was quiet for now, but I knew it would return. It always returned. And outside, I heard the sirens growing closer. The chair didn't care. The chair wanted them too. The sirens drew closer, shrieking through the night, but by the time they reached my street, it was already too late. The hunger had awakened again, and I was no longer hiding it. The chair pulsed inside me, stretching its roots through my veins, filling me with a strength that bent the air around me. When the first officers broke through my door, shouting commands, flashlights cutting through the dark, I could smell them before I saw them. Their heat, their breath, the blood thrumming in their veins. It called to me like a feast laid out on a table. I stood slowly from where the chair had fused with me, splinters cracking free of my spine as I rose. The officers froze, their beams landing on my face, my chest, the bark-like skin crawling across my body. One gagged. The other tried to shout again, but the words caught in his throat. Then I moved. I don't remember the exact details, not fully. Only flashes, one man's jaw snapping loose in my grip, another's arm tearing away with a sickening pop, their blood spraying the walls in a fine mist. Their screams blended with the sirens outside, and for the first time I didn't fight the pleasure that rolled through me. I welcomed it. The chair inside me hummed with delight, its rhythm matching my own heartbeat, until I couldn't tell where I ended and it began. The neighbors came next. Doors opened down the street, faces pale in the glow of flashing lights. Some screamed and ran, others froze, transfixed by the horror spilling out of my house. I staggered toward them, my legs stiff and wrong, each step cracking the pavement beneath me. Wherever I walked, the ground seemed to warp, spiderwebs of splinters spreading outward, as though the curse itself seeped into the concrete. A man tried to flee down the road, but the asphalt beneath him cracked, buckled, and rose like wooden planks. He stumbled, fell, and before he could rise again, the black veins spreading through the street wrapped around his limbs, dragging him down. His body twisted into impossible angles, bones breaking one by one as he screamed. The road itself seemed to devour him, swallowing him whole until only silence remained. I didn't have to touch them anymore. The curse was spreading on its own. The air grew heavy, thick with the smell of rot and damp wood. Street lamps flickered, their bulbs bursting one by one, showering sparks onto the screaming crowd. The shadows in the windows lengthened, stretching into forms that shouldn't exist. Chairs, hundreds of them, took shape in the darkness, their legs bent and jagged, their backs broken, their seats slick with something dark. They filled the windows, the doorways, the alleys, watching, waiting, and then they moved. One by one, the chairs tore themselves free from the shadows, dragging their warped bodies into the street. Some crawled on their legs like insects, their wooden frames clattering against the ground. Others stumbled upright, their arms snapping like jaws. People tried to run, but the chairs were faster. They leapt, clung, crushed. Screams filled the night as the town drowned in wood and splinters. I stood in the center of it all, my chest heaving, my veins glowing faintly with the black fire inside me. And though I wanted to look away, though I wanted to close my eyes and block it out, I couldn't, because it felt good. Too good. The voice inside me was no longer whispering, no longer coaxing, it was laughing. And I was laughing with it. The police tried to fight. Guns roared, bullets tearing through the night, but they did nothing. Each shot that struck a chair only split it into pieces, and those pieces crawled like spiders, snapping and biting with jagged shards. An officer screamed as his throat was pierced by a splintered leg, another as his chest was punctured by a backrest that bent into a spear. Their gunfire became cries, their cries became silence, and then they were gone. The town became a nightmare. I walked its streets as though they belonged to me, and in a way they did. Wherever I stepped, the curse followed. Houses twisted, their walls bending inward, their beams groaning as though alive. Windows melted into dark reflections, each one showing me seated in the chair, grinning that black grin. I smashed them, but the images never stopped. People begged. Some fell to their knees before me, hands clasped, praying as if I were some god of wood and blood. Others screamed curses, spitting in my direction before their jaws were ripped apart by the splintering ground. It didn't matter what they did. The curse didn't discriminate, it consumed them all, and I could feel it spreading further still, beyond the town, into the roads that led out, into the forests, into the soil itself. The hunger wasn't mine alone anymore. It was everywhere. I saw trees bending unnaturally, their branches snapping into jagged arms, their bark splitting to reveal pale, wet flesh beneath. I saw birds fall from the sky, their wings snapping like brittle wood, their bodies twisting into miniature chairs before they hit the ground. The world was rotting, and I was the rot's beating heart. That night, I made my way back to the museum. I don't know why, maybe some remnant of me still thought destroying the original chair would end it. Or maybe the curse was simply guiding me home. The building was deserted, the doors hanging open, alarms blaring faintly in the distance. Inside, the exhibits lay shattered, trampled in the chaos. And in the back room, lit by a single dying bulb, the chair still hung on the wall, untouched, waiting. For a moment, I just stared at it. My reflection in its dark wood was unrecognizable. My skin cracked and peeling, my eyes hollow, my mouth stretched into that same black grin. The thing inside me trembled with hunger, urging me closer, demanding that I join it, fuse with it completely. I reached up, my hands shaking, and touched the seat. It was warm. It pulsed beneath my palms, alive. And then it spoke, not in whispers, not in urges, but in a voice that filled the room. 1,000 screams pressed into one. You are mine, and now they are mine too. The walls shuddered. The floor split open, black tendrils writhing outward, twisting up the walls, cracking the ceiling. The museum itself groaned like a dying animal, beams snapping, glass shattering. I stumbled back as the chair tore free from its restraints, the brackets snapping like brittle bones. It floated, rising into the air, its legs bending, stretching, twisting into something monstrous. It no longer needed me, it was free, but I was still bound to it. The veins crawling across my skin burned, tightening, dragging me forward like chains. My chest felt like it was splitting open, my ribs cracking outward, my spine arching until I thought it would snap. I screamed, clawing at myself, but the blackness poured out of me in great waves, rushing into the chair, feeding it, making it stronger. And when it was done, I collapsed on the floor, hollow, my body shaking. The chair hovered above me, enormous now, its frame fused with flesh and bone, its seat slick with pulsing veins. Its legs slammed into the ground, splitting the stone beneath them, and it roared. A sound like wood splintering, like bones snapping, like the end of the world. The town outside answered. I heard the buildings groan, the road split, the people scream as the curse spread in every direction. And I knew then it was no longer about me. The hunger was loose. It was in the earth, the air, the water. It would spread and spread until nothing remained but splinters and screams. And still, beneath it all, I felt the faintest echo of myself, trapped, watching, knowing that I had unleashed something that could never be stopped. The chair had wanted me, but now it wanted everything, and it would take it. The chair's roar split the night, and the world trembled under it. I lay on the cracked museum floor, my chest heaving, my body half splintered, and I felt the earth respond. It wasn't just the town anymore. It was everywhere. The curse stretched outward in great, unseen waves, surging through soil and stone, through roots and rivers, through every line and vein of the world. I saw it in flashes, visions forced into my skull like nails hammered into bone. Forests twisted in on themselves, trees snapping their trunks to bend into grotesque shapes, branches knitting into jagged seats and backs. Birds fell from the sky, their wings turning to rigid wood mid-flight, their screams swallowed by the cracking of their bones. Animals writhed in fields and forests, their bodies contorting, joints snapping until they collapsed into monstrous mockeries of chairs, twitching, lifeless. Cities fared no better. Towers of glass and steel bent and warped, the structures cracking and folding as though invisible hands shaped them. Windows darkened, their reflections filled with endless rows of empty chairs, each one waiting. Streets split apart, wooden beams erupting from the asphalt, skewering cars and pedestrians alike. People screamed, ran, clawed at the ground, but the curse was faster. One by one they fell. I felt every death, every scream, every bone shattered, every body twisted into splinters. It all poured into me, a tide of agony and hunger. I should have vomited, should have clawed my own eyes out, but instead, I laughed. The chair inside me laughed, and it was my mouth, my voice, my throat ripping itself raw as the sound filled the broken museum. The world was becoming the chair, and still I crawled. Some last shred of myself, pathetic and weak, tried to escape, dragging my ruined body toward the door. My hands left streaks of blood and black tar across the floor, my fingernails tearing off in strips as I pulled myself forward. I wanted to believe I could still resist, still find some corner of the earth untouched. But every step only showed me more visions. Across oceans, waves rose up, black and thick, carrying with them forests of splintered limbs. Fish twisted into wooden grotesqueries, their fins cracking into sharp edges, their eyes dark and empty. Ships were dragged down by tendrils of wood bursting from the deep, sailors screaming as their bones snapped and bent into jagged furniture beneath the waves. Mountains groaned, their peaks cracking apart, spilling forests of chair-like shapes down their slopes. Deserts split open, dunes collapsing into pits filled with writhing blackness. Even the skies weren't safe. Clouds thickened, darkened, their shapes warping into outlines of towering thrones, casting shadows that stretched for miles. There was nowhere to go, nowhere left. I made it to the doorway of the museum, my body twitching and jerking, every joint resisting me, bending in directions they shouldn't. My chest split again, ribs cracking outward like jagged chair legs, and I screamed, half in pain, half in ecstasy. The curse wanted me still. It wanted me whole, fused, complete. I resisted, but it was useless. Outside, the town was gone. In its place stood a forest of chairs. Thousands, tens of thousands, stretching as far as the eye could see. Some small, some massive, their shapes twisted and broken, their seats slick with blood. They rocked gently in the wind, though there was no wind. They rocked because they were alive, and among them crawled what was left of the people. Their bodies bent, their limbs twisted, their faces stretched into masks of agony. They dragged themselves on splintered arms, some still screaming, others silent, their mouths locked open as if mid-shout. They reached toward me, hundreds of them, as though I were their shepherd, their prophet, their king. The chair behind me, the original one, the heart of it all, slammed its legs into the ground and the earth split wide. From the crack poured more of that black fluid, thick and endless, spreading across the town, the streets, the fields beyond. Wherever it touched, life ended. Wherever it touched, the curse began. And then I understood. I wasn't just its victim. I wasn't just its vessel. I was its mouth, its eyes, its hands. I had carried it out of the museum, out of its prison, and given it the world. And now, there was no stopping it. There was no undoing what had begun. I collapsed to my knees in the doorway, my body giving out at last. My legs splintered beneath me, cracking into wooden stumps. My arms stiffened, bending backward until the joints snapped and reformed into rigid angles. My face stretched, skin splitting across my cheeks, my jaw locking into a permanent grin. I felt myself becoming it, fusing with it, my humanity bleeding away into the endless hunger. And still the visions came. I saw continents falling silent, cities swallowed whole, their people twisted into grotesque thrones and benches, monuments of suffering stretching into the horizon. I saw the oceans turn black, waves of splintered wood rising higher than mountains, crashing down on coasts that shattered under their weight. I saw the sky split open, clouds forming into shapes so vast and hideous that the sun itself vanished behind them. The world wasn't dying, it was changing, becoming. The last piece of me, the tiny human fragment clinging to itself inside the storm, tried to scream, to beg, to pray. But even as the sound tore from my throat, it wasn't my scream anymore. It was the chair's. It was the scream of every soul it had ever devoured, every body it had ever broken, every voice it had ever silenced. A chorus of agony that would never end. And then silence. The earth stopped trembling. The skies went still, the oceans calmed. Because there was nothing left. I don't know how much time has passed. Time doesn't mean anything now. I sit in endless dark, surrounded by shapes I can't describe, and I feel the hunger still. Not for food, not for blood, for more. Always more. But there is no more. The world is gone, everything is gone. Except me, except the chair. And maybe that's the true curse. Not the deaths, not the suffering, but the silence that follows when all of it is consumed. Sitting here in the dark, knowing I am the last echo of a world devoured. Knowing that I brought it here, that I opened the door, that I let it free. The chair still whispers sometimes, though it doesn't need to anymore. It whispers sit, as it always did. But there's nowhere left to sit. Nowhere left at all. Only me and the hunger. Forever. Thank you for listening. I kindly ask you to drop a like and subscribe and share this video with fellow horror story fan.